Today is going to be an exciting one. I'm going to be showing you markets and travel. But before we get into the showcase, we want to talk a little bit with Sergey and Protoplanetary about what they've been working on, and then we'll get into the share. So I'm just going to pass the mic over to Sergey and let him introduce a little bit about what he's been working on and some of the interesting components of that, and then we'll go to Proto, and then we'll get to the share.
Very cool. Thanks. Yeah, to give you guys an update, yeah, I wish I had screen shares to share, but this is so live and things are still changing underfoot at the moment that I didn't feel quite comfortable. But I will let you in on what I've been involved in for the last week and a half or so. And it is a kind of late stage update to our information and permissions UI. So there's nothing changing with the systems, with the underlying permissions contracts or whatever, but this is just basically a UI exploration that came about through me beginning to play the game and realizing some things that were not surfaced as clearly as they should have been, and also designing an updated basically information panel. So you guys have seen the client right now. We have this side panel on the right that drives a lot of the key informational components, and then you bring up windows in the middle that tell you that initiate basically game actions. One of the windows that I just wrapped up designing was a comprehensive eye or information panel. And that information panel goes along with every type of asset and it drills down to the specific view modes in the game. So if, for example, you have Adalian Prime clicked and you hit the eye, this will give you all the information you need about Adalian Prime. Now, if you're on the surface of Adalian Prime, you got a lot clicked, this will give you information about that lot and whether or not there's a building on that lot. And you can actually drill down. I made kind of this interactive prototype where you could actually drill down. The furthest you can go is, you'll go down to a lot. That lot could have a building, in particular a spaceport, which can contain ships. Then you can drill down to a ship and get an information about that ship. And so we have information panels all set up, and the information panels contain both the name of the asset, they contain description of the asset, and any relevant public settings that the UI will show. So this is a really good, basically this is the read-only lens through which a lot of people, including even people who are not logged into the game, can just go in and inspect stuff and see all the details, all the public details for every asset in the game. And the part that I'm wrapping up right now is the management side of things. So there is going to be an eye information panels, and then there's going to be an asset management panel, depending on if you are the owner of the asset. And that's where you can basically set all of the settings for that asset. Now, there are some settings that are retained with the manager that aren't permissions-based setting, such as renaming and setting the public description for that thing. And then there's this whole component which I'm wrapping up work with Proto right now on, which is the viewing and the editing of both permissions policies on an item and an allow list on an item. And we just kind of wrapped up, basically there's this overarching umbrella of permissions, which is one of the more complicated systems in our game that we did do an initial design pass on. But I realized after looking at it that it wasn't as usable, and it didn't really match up. That editing of the permissions didn't really match up with the permissions that were set in the new eye information panels that I designed. So long story short, I'm making a match, and we are hoping. We just had a very long conversation about it this morning. It's kind of putting the last bits and pieces in place. We are hoping that we're going to have a really nice user-friendly view crew-centric view of a permission, so that when you open any kind of asset type, whether or not you're actually, even if you're not logged into the game, you can still see, hey, can I do something? Did the asset's owner set a permission? Did they set up a policy where, like, I can rent this permission if I wanted to? Are they keeping it private? Or in the event that you are logged in, maybe I already have an existing contract for this permission, so you want to know, can I interact with it? Can I not interact with it, such as, because it's been set to restricted by the owner? Or if I have already interacted with it in the past and I have an agreement made, hey, I can go in, look at my agreement, see when it runs out, potentially extend it if I want to.
Yeah.
So that's that in that's that in a nutshell.
So, Sergey, when we're talking about this, is the intent where you're not having to be logged in at this point? Why was that kind of prioritized there rather than needing to be logged in? I'm just maybe for context for the audience
I
here.
wouldn't say I prioritized it, but we were talking about. I wanted to keep it in mind. It's definitely a lower priority thing, but I have this use case in mind. Most of the time, if you are logged into the game, you are looking through the eyes of a particular crew, right? You have to have an active crew. But if you just open Influence as a browser tab and you decide not to log in, there's like this cool way that you can interact through the eyes of basically an anonymous observer. And there isn't really a big reason why not, but people who, for example, do not play Influence, or people who just want to zoom around and inspect things without logging in for whatever reason, will have the ability to do so, because a lot of the settings, the permissions, and whether or not someone has set up a rentable asteroid or whether or not someone has kept their asteroid private, it's all public knowledge. So I think there is some value to being able to go in through no crew's eyes and just see what the settings are for things.
Yeah, it's an interesting concept that, like, when I talk to some of the creators and they kind of understand, like, wait, you can do things without making an account in the game. Like, it doesn't compute at first. So, like, one, browser games are still relatively new in adoption, and two, being able to actually, like, kind of view the game without having an account yet is just not really something that other games do. So I think it's really fun and interesting. But it's definitely a new design space. So
just call it like an added perk. But we assume that most people who are interacting will be interacting while logged in, and that means it will be through the eyes of one of your crews, like whether or not you can access a particular permission or not.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because
I was just going to say,
go
to
for it,
put that
brother.
in perspective with a lot of other sort of Web 2 sites, I mean, the aggressive funnel into logging in is there so that, basically everything you do on that website is, data is collected on it, it's saved to a centralized database, like that, analytics are collected. That's basically the sort of whole reason behind logins on Web 2. This is Web 3. Like, we don't have to make you log in for you to be able to see stuff. Like, we're not, going to be collecting crap tons of data. Like, it's, it's a whole different paradigm. I think, Explorer is just one asset, one sort of aspect of that, being able to check out the vault without logging in. And yeah, and then of course logging in.
There's no reason Web 2 couldn't do that. They just don't make any money off of it, right? Like imagine World of Warcraft, right? And allowing you to just fly around Azeroth and just observe other people playing, right? Without actually creating an account. That seems kind of unimaginable, but it's just they don't make money. Us, on the other hand, we don't have server costs. Everything's public anyways. It's uploaded to the chain.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting too. I mean, if you guys, most of you guys are probably asteroid owners here in the audience, but if you're inspecting an asteroid to see whether or not you want to buy it and you want to see the infrastructure on it, the policies that are currently active, whatever it might be, like, the best way to do that is just go to the game and look at it instead of, having to fly a ship there or something to actually look at it. So I think it's going to be it's a very interesting component of the game. Sergey, was there anything else that you wanted to bring up, or can I pass it over to Proto?
By all means, pass it over.
Yeah, all right, Proto. Share away.
Sure. Yeah. So what I've been focusing on for the past few weeks now is actually the initial colony design for Adalia Prime. So just to recap, like when the game launches, in pre-release soon and in exploitation a little bit after soon, you will be seeing Adalia Prime in this sort of primal state that basically the colonists have taken the remnants of the Arvad, the colony ship that they colonized Adalia with, and they have spread them out across the surface of Adalia Prime. They've built buildings to live in, and that's sort of forms the core of that initial colony. So what that is made up of is basically a bunch of habitats for your crews to live in for the first, several, however many players we get for their crews to live in. Then marketplaces, which will contain all the seeded goods, all the products that we want to make available for purchase at the very beginning of the game to sort of kickstart the economy. Those marketplaces will be present in those initial colonies. Also, we're going to have a bunch of warehouses to hold those seeded goods. They need to be somewhere. So we're going to put some warehouses that can't be publicly accessed, but we'll be holding those goods that are in the marketplace for sale. And then lastly, we're going to have some public warehouses that are sort of like free piles that you can dump goods into, and anybody can come along and take those goods out if they want. Just if you want to get rid of something, sort of a fun little mechanic there. So those are the building types that we're making these colonies out of. And let me see if I can share my screen here, because I can show you the colony design that we've got here. You guys able to see that? I think so. Yeah, so
yep, we got it.
It's
Thanks for
still
sharing.
awesome.
loading.
So to
You-
recap,
cool.
there are actually 3 colonies on Adalia Prime.
Proto.
Yeah.
You might have to close it and reopen it again. Discord's not showing it, to me at least, and typically that means others might have problems with it.
Okay.
Let's try it again.
I was able to see it. I don't know if anybody else could confirm.
I'll try it again. All right. Check.
I can see it again.
I cannot see it, which I'm recording, so I'm not
Yikes.
sure why I
will
can't see it,
paste
but let me.
these
Oh, I
images.
see what's going on. Yeah, the restream has a perpetual loading signal on it.
Let me. It might be.
Haha.
It
I'll
might be
paste
on
these
my end.
images
Let me
in
just.
public, so don't worry about I'll share all these, so you guys will be able to see them, whether or not it's actually in the stream.
That's kind of funny because,
so
yeah, it
what
would
we're
be
looking at right now
technically
for those-
because the stream is getting shared twice. Once on Discord and once on Restream, and I can see why. Yeah. But yes, definitely post the images because they're quite cool. And I assume the people in the AMA channel, not in the Restream, potentially are still seeing it because I am.
Yeah, it looks like it's a mixed bag of people being able to see it or not. Proto, maybe you just want to drop an image here in the chat. Yeah, most people are saying loading. It might help, Proto, if you just leave and rejoin. It'll likely work. This has happened plenty of times to me.
Darn. Okay.
You don't have to do anything with Restream. It's just joining or leaving and joining the Discord. Proto, can you hear us? Sergey,
I can hear everything, and I still have the stream, but Proto disappeared.
Yeah, I think it's
now
on
we've
Proto.
not only lost a stream, we've lost Proto himself.
Yeah, I don't know if it's an internet thing. Oh, there we go. Okay, he's gonna join back.
We're re-streaming.
Juice, your GIF makes me laugh because isn't he also the guy that was on Verizon and then he did a commercial with T-Mobile? He swapped advertising. That's how powerful he was of an image. He was able to now go to another company.
Right? Isn't that guy super old too now? That commercial is quite.
It's what, 20 years ago? Oh, okay. Yeah, Proto, your stream isn't coming through, unfortunately. So I'm not sure. And it sounds like it's not
Yeah.
just me at this point.
Even I
Maybe.
have got the loading screen share now.
Let's see if these go through. So yeah, everyone go to general channel. I've just shared the images of the initial colonies, and also I think let's see if I can do this correctly. Should also be well. Let's just start with that. So these are the initial colonies. So the lower right one, that is the biggest colony of the three. You guys heard me talking earlier about the three colonies, right?
You might want to just go into it again.
Sure. So there's basically going to be three colonies on Adalia Prime, spread out across the surface of the asteroid. We've got basically one of them is the very biggest, and this one is what we're calling Arcos, after Donald Arcos, the very first captain of the Arvad, back when it left Earth 150 years previously. And this one is centered around the current single habitat that you guys have all put your crews into on Adalia Prime in limited release. So you're all familiar with that one habitat, and there will be about 49 more of the habitats. As you can see, as all those red dots are habitats. This is, basically to be able to hold the number of crews that we expect initial players to be playing with when we launch exploitation. So that's that large cluster in the middle there. And then the ring around it, the green is all warehouses to hold the seeded goods for those seeded goods that we'll be selling on the marketplaces to begin. There's lots of different goods, so we need a lot of little marketplaces to hold those. They'll sort of be like depots, Prime Council's depots that are holding the goods from the Arvad. And the blue dots, those are the marketplaces that are present in Arcos. So you can sort of see those like three lumps around the ring. There's 12 marketplaces in Arcos. There's also six of the sort of free piles. Those light blue dots are the free pile warehouses that are publicly accessible. Anybody can put goods into or take goods out of them. So that'll again be kind of a fun little mechanic. And then the dark blue dots, those three dots in the center of those nodules around the ring, those are spaceports. So there will be three main spaceports that are available in Arcos. So that's the initial design. This is again kind of like a clean, slick colony that the Prime Council is managing fairly heavy-handedly. It's supposed to be nice and orderly and organized, and all of the goods will be available.
Real quick before
Mhm.
before we move on to this one, there's a good question that it looks like Chris already answered, but do we all spawn? Does every single person spawn at the Arcos colony? And I think do you want to go into that?
Yeah. So currently in limited release, everybody is spawning in the single habitat at the very center of Arcos, which we have actually named Lucinda's Landing after the Lucinda Natus, the very first, or the current High Commander of the Arvad, and that's where she sort of first puts boots on the ground in Adalia, is at this location. So the single habitat is where everybody is right now. As soon as we have put more habitats on mainnet into Adalia, which will happen fairly soon, after pre-release, but soon in the scheme of things, you will be able then to move your crews from that single habitat that they're all in right now into other those habitats that are in the initial colony. And I think it will also become an option for when you create new crewmates, potentially to create them into those new habitats, those new public habitats, not just the single one that you're in right now. For the time being, those don't exist.
Okay, yeah,
on yet.
Even at pre-release, when we're going to have hundreds and thousands of people joining, I think that was the interesting question. Do you get randomly sprinkled around, or does everyone still start on one habitat with the option to move immediately from there?
Yes, the idea is that
Yes, the idea is
choose
that
for me, like that'll be the sort of
like
default option, and the idea there is that it will sprinkle you across a random public habitat on Adalia Prime, which at the moment is just a single one, but there will be more as I'm showing here. And then you will also have the ability to go and pick a habitat yourself if you want to, recruit a crewmate in that specific habitat. But so yeah, that's Arcos.
Like that whole cluster of red dots in the middle of the biggest colony are all habitats.
Those are all habitats. There's 50 habitats.
Provide enough living space.
Exactly for half of the initial player base. So the other half of the initial player base will be in these other two smaller colonies. So the upper right of those three images. So this is Yaakche. I'm not exactly sure if I'm pronouncing that right, but it's Tree of Life in Maya, which is the theme of this colony. It's sort of an alternative, like, relief valve colony that the Prime Council founded. It's sort of, Arcos is basically on the equator. This one is also pretty close to the equator, but it's about 120 degrees around Adalia Prime, away from it. So it's not quite on the other side of AP, but getting there. And so this one is sort of full of lots of alternative types of people. We're thinking, the ones who didn't really like to sort of live in the big city with the Prime Council like ruling everything. And so they have sort of designed it around this fractal branching tree pattern you sort of see here. So it's got these three kind of trunks, and then even some more branching going on with the layout of the buildings. And primarily,
so in other
the
words,
big difference
rebel
here,
scum.
What was that?
Right. I said, in other words, rebel scum, the ones that didn't want to be with the Prime Council.
I mean, these are all official colonies, but the Prime Council recognized that not everybody loves them, and so they wanted to give them the spot so they can go and hang out and sort of be a little bit more rebellious without actually hurting anything. So this is where they wound up. So the main difference here is that the habitats aren't all in the middle; they're around the outer part of the colony. And what's actually in the middle is the spaceports. And there are two spaceports here, which, if you saw, there were three in Arcos. This whole colony is about 2/3 the size of Arcos in terms of buildings and other properties. And in particular, the marketplaces will have about 2/3 of all the available products in them. So not everything will be seeded here. If you want absolutely everything, you should go to Arcos. This one will have a little bit less. And in lore, this is actually the location of the first tree to be planted in Adalia in one of the habitats, which is why it's named Tree of Life, or Yakshe in Maya. So that's the second one. And then the last one, which is the big picture on the left here, this is the smallest colony, and it is named Saline, which is sort of after like the salty water that you may be familiar with if you've ever been in a medical situation where they had to inject saline or whatever. But anyway, it's salty water, and it's a mining colony. That's the sort of main theme that we've got here. It's laid out a lot more utilitarian in style. It's got this sort of just skewed grid pattern, and it's basically built around the precept that the Prime Council needed to get some mines going, and so this is what they came up with. It's located very close to the south pole of Adalia Prime, so quite a ways away from both of the other colonies. It's basically there to be mined. It's not as a population center really, and it's near two deposits in pre-release anyway. It's near two deposits of, I think, bitumen and what was the other one? Apatite, yeah. So it'll be near to pretty major deposits there, and you'll be able to, if you want to live there and start there, you'll be able to mine pretty conveniently from this location. It's got the one spaceport in the middle, and in terms of number of marketplaces, it only has about a third of the total products available seated there. So the basics, but not much else. If you want to get anything else, you'll have to go to the other two colonies for it, at least to start with. And then the last piece of this puzzle, which some of you may be familiar with, is that we have names for all of these habitats now, which let me just grab a real quick screenshot and share that in general of our name list. We opened it up to public submissions a few days ago, which was great. We got so many good suggestions. We had a little bit more than we had space for. So, if you don't see some of your suggestions there, that's why we may have changed things a little bit. But I have just shared those names in the general channel. So if you want to take a look at those. And so these are basically grouped by category. So Arcos, again, the largest colony, has names that are based on real life asteroid names. So we shared a list of all the solar system asteroids out there and specified that they had to be some of the smaller ones, not the very biggest 1,000 asteroids. And people suggested a whole bunch of really interesting names. So we've got some of those there. For Yakshe, we've got tree names, so names of tree species. And again, we had a lot of great suggestions. Had to adapt a few. They were given in Latin, and we had to turn them to column names, etc. But we've got 33 really great tree names there. And note that Seba is actually the tree of life that Yakshe is named after, so that's in there. And lastly, for Saline, we've got mineral names. So we've got 17 fun mineral names. Those are all a mouthful, most of them. So I think as people have pointed out, they will become abbreviated probably pretty quickly. But again, these are the places that your crews will live at exploitation and pre-release as well. Like these will be your home. So at least to start with, before people start building their own habitats. So we thought it was pretty important to give them interesting names. All the other buildings will have names as well. They'll probably be a little bit more utilitarian for the most part. Just telling you like what's in a marketplace, or even getting down to the numbers for some of the warehouses. But for the habitats, they're interesting, and we wanted to give them some variety. So yeah, that's pretty much what I've been working on is this whole plan for the colony. It's coming along. It should be, Darkos is scripting it up so that we can deploy the same colony in pre-release that we're going to deploy in mainnet. So it should be pretty smooth to get that deployed up. Yeah, I can't wait to see what you guys do with them.
Yeah, it's super
Habitats,
exciting.
spaceports, and markets. Those are going to be key public buildings.
Yep.
There are also going to be, I believe, exceptionally both time and resource intensive for players to build themselves, but that's why we're seeding the first ones. And there are, do you want to mention, Proto, I don't know, like some of the stats that are important? Like when I believe I was asking about some of this the other day too, but like important to know, okay, how many crews before the habitats, begins to start penalizing you? How many spaceships before the spaceport gets filled up?
Yeah, for sure. So for habitats, what we've got right now is a hard cap at 1,000 crew mates, not crews, but crew mates. So, if every crew had 5 crewmates in it, that would be 200 crews in the habitat. There's a soft cap at 500, which if you're in a habitat that has under 500 crewmates in it, there's a bonus to efficiency of everything you do is about 1.2 times faster, just because you're in this nice, not overcrowded habitat, and life is good and you're feeling good, and you're just more efficient. As it starts to get more overcrowded, over 500, that will decay back down to 1 at a completely full hard capped out 1,000 crewmate habitat. So that's how habitats work. For spaceports, they have a hard cap of 500 or 50 rather ships in them. So can't fit any more than 50 ships in it. And there's also a fun mechanic, which is basically that the more ships that are in it, the longer it takes for a ship to come and go, linearly up to 50. So there's like a little bit of a delay that is associated with that. And moreover, that delay queues. So if a lot of people are trying to come and go at the same time, you will find yourself in a queue, and you'll have to wait for a bunch of people to finish their leaving and going before you're able to get your ship in or out of the spaceport. So this should be an interesting sort of natural soft cap on how many ships people are putting into their spaceports, especially if they're busy and coming and going a lot. You'll find that it gets kind of slow, and you might want to get a new spaceport as it starts to approach that 50 limit. So that's how spaceports work. And then for marketplaces, they can store up to 20 different products in them, or have pairs, trading pairs for up to 20 different products in them. And so that's the limiting factor that's at how many marketplaces we needed in these colonies to offer all of the products in the game, so that the economy can get started up. All of them except for, I should say, ship hulls. Those you'll have to build yourselves. So yeah, that's the gist of those buildings. And I think that might actually lead pretty well into what Darkos has to share.
Yeah, thank you, Proto. I think it should probably also be mentioned, markets is 20 different products before bonuses or traits, I believe. That can be adjusted a little bit depending on your merchant's traits. But yeah, I mean, let's go ahead and toss it over to Chris. I know you're excited to show the client. Hopefully that loads, unlike what Proto's screen was doing. So let's go ahead and see if that works here. If the chat could let us know whether or not they see it, that would be fantastic. Right now, I see that it's just loading.
Well, that's Proto's.
Oh.
Yep.
Sorry, what's Ben?
Yeah, you might. Proto, you're still sharing. Technically sharing your screen.
No, I crashed out. I had to restart my machine, so that's dead. That's Adrian.
Oh, okay. So it's just a remnant.
It's a
Can
zombie.
Can you kill that, JP? Because it blocks anybody else from being able to share now.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's not letting me kick it or anything. So it's attached to Proto. So Proto, could you just leave the stream really quick and rejoin? Yeah. Okay. You should be able to share.
I still don't seem to have that ability.
Oh, wow. Every time he joins back, it's there again. So it's
I'll try to exit and come back in and see what happens.
Yeah. It sounds like this is a Discord issue.
Hang on, before he comes back, let me share.
There we go. All right, I can see it.
Same here.
Can everybody?
Yeah. It looks like chat's saying they're able to see it.
Okay, great. All right, so to show off a little bit of the work we've been doing over the last several weeks. As we get closer and closer here to pre-release, mostly it's been a focus on wrapping up travel, and then a big focus on marketplaces, which are a fairly complex from a contract point of view. There's been a lot of back and forth, just kind of hammering those home, making sure that we're handling all of these, I think, quite interesting non-custodial flows of sway through both the buys and sells and limit buys and sells, and that has happened. And so I wanted to show you guys a little bit. Keep in mind, of course, this is still a very inactive development client, and there's a lot going on. There has been a lot of testing this morning, so you might see some things that are a little bit off, but I just want to share regardless. So the first thing I'm going to do is just kind of show you the market. So I'll go ahead and highlight some of the buildings. You can see we've got a couple markets here in green. This one I believe is currently private, but this one is public. And I can go and check it out. Keep in mind, probably most marketplaces will be public, since that's obviously the most benefit to the marketplace owners, for them to get as many people involved as possible. When I go take a look at the marketplace itself, you can see here there's 10 different products that have been listed and basically added to the allowed list for this marketplace. There are at the moment 3 that actually have active orders. You can see them both from the perspective of buying and selling, depending on which side of the depth chart is active. So I'm going to go check out a core drill. You can see there's a number of both limit buys and limit sells currently active that sort of define this depth chart, which many of you will likely be familiar with. We're identifying the spread, what's available, as well as allowing for you to both place a new limit order as well as to just buy directly from the market. That's what I'm going to do at the moment. I'm just going to go ahead and pick up a core drill so I can go ahead and start sampling some deposits here and there. This will, as with most other things, give you the opportunity to deliver it to a specific inventory. I'm going to pick the newest warehouse that I have built. You can see some information here about what you're buying, how much you're buying, what the current market price is, which is 106 sway per unit. This is the price from a single seller. If you were covering multiple sellers, it would make you aware of that as well, and take care of running those multiple buys in parallel in a single multi-call. This also shows you what the taker fee is. This actually doesn't have any set at the moment, so there is none. And it shows you how long it's going to take to get to your warehouse. In this case, my crew is starving, so it's going to take a little bit longer. But fortunately for me, the testnet is sped up by 100x, so not too long. And then finally showing you the mass and volume of what it is that you're actually ordering. So I'll go ahead and do this, which presumably you can't see, but it's just a transaction pop-up that tells me that I'm spending 106 sway. It's doing a couple of transfers, both to the seller as well as to the marketplace owner for portions of that sway, and then it's actually running the buy. So I'll go ahead and confirm that.
Oh, Chris, I don't think we were able to see your wallet pop up. Just FYI.
Yeah, I figured as much because I'm sharing in full screen here. But that
we can share. I can share an image in general later.
Sure.
Show what that looks like.
So there we go. Purchase 1 core drill, 106 sway, marketplace 98. And then that is now on its way to my warehouse, which is over here. And I can get that finalized once it's finished. So that's kind of like a quick look at the market.
Chris, before we move on to anything else, I think it might be good to talk about session keys and what part of that it reduces, because I know that having your wallet pop up and everything is not exactly conducive to gameplay.
No, that's true. The marketplace is actually one of the most interesting spots to talk about session keys, because our initial approach to sessions is to basically have it such that the game itself is cleared for use with a session key, but not the NFT assets and not Sway. But I would be curious to get feedback from the community if that would be desirable. Would you be willing to have a generated session key that's able to sign transactions for Sway, basically like blind? It's effectively blind signing. But in a world where you could potentially set a limit on how much Sway is spent during a session. Because I think that's kind of the direction we're working towards. Without that, if we just limit to the game itself, in the marketplace, you would still see those pop-ups. You would still see the prompt to sign a transaction, because it deals with Sway and not just the game state. Whereas most of these other interactions, moving goods just from warehouses, or launching your ship into orbit, extracting, refining, core sampling, all of those would happen without any prompts.
Maybe just a further question on that, Chris, is with sessions, is it possible to limit Sway transfers to only within a marketplace? So it's not like you're basically saying Sway can be transferred in and out of my wallet regardless of how. It would be limited to interaction with the marketplace?
No, that's not possible. And the reason is that the marketplaces in Influence are non-custodial. The game itself, the marketplaces, none of that ever takes on control or custody of your Sway. It's always yours, just as is the case with your crew, your crewmates, your ships, your asteroids. They're always yours and in your wallets and under your control. The way we've designed the marketplaces when it comes to Sway is that we are aware of those transactions. We know where they're going. We know what they're bookmarked to do, and we can receive that information on within the game's contracts, but we don't actually control the transfer of the Sway. So the answer is no. What we can do, though, like I mentioned, is kind of limit how much can be transferred. And the reality here is this key is short-lived. It lives in your browser. You have control over it. It's temporary, and you can set both an expiration time and a maximum amount of Sway and ether that it can spend.
If so that max is exceeded.
Sorry?
What happens when the max is exceeded? Actually,
you'll be prompted to create another session.
Got it. So it will just fail. And if you don't create another session, can you on a contract by contract basis just approve it?
Yeah, you would just go back to you would just go right back to signing a transaction the way that you're used to.
Okay, so you could have a session active for very small amounts, and then for big amounts, you still have the basically individual confirmation. Perfect.
It could absolutely fall back to that, and I think that's a pretty cool arrangement. The goal here is that you come into Influence, and as part of that sign-in process, you approve a session. You're basically saying, I'm signing into Influence, I'm starting a new session. It'll have some defaults in there, which you could play with if you wanted. But the idea being that it has approved enough Sway for you to have, a reasonable play session without being bothered by signing transactions. And then that's it. That's how you experience the game. Looking a little bit further towards paymasters, the idea would there be that you can pay the gas for these transactions, which should of course be getting smaller and smaller, pay that gas with sway. So you should at that point not really care about anything when it comes to crypto except for your sway. And all you're really worried about then is, I'm starting a session and I've approved $25 of sway or $10 of sway or whatever it is. And that's what I'm comfortable with. I'm going to play. And at the end of that, that key disappears. Nobody can use it ever again. And my funds are totally safe.
Yeah, there's the session key or account abstraction space is still ramping up, but it's one of those things that probably in a year's time we're going to see like countless ways to use these things and it be very user friendly.
JP, any marketplace questions coming up that I can answer before I move on?
Nothing specific to marketplaces yet, so we can cover the questions that are there later.
Okay, awesome. We'll probably cover this in more detail as the permission panels are, as we're showing those off. But the marketplaces are actually quite detailed in what you can do as an owner. So there's, I mentioned the maker fee. That's something that you set as a marketplace owner. That basically is a fee charged to anybody who's creating a limit buy or a limit sell order, an order that will sit on the market. And then there's also a taker fee that you can set, which will be charged to the person who comes along and actually buys from the market or sells into the market. Those are further modified by your crew's traits. So if you got a crew full of merchants, a crew full of well-traded merchants, you're going to get reductions in those fees. And then on the flip side, if you've got some well-traded merchants running your marketplaces, they actually compete against the taker merchants or against their customers, I suppose, the people who are interacting with the marketplace. They compete to basically pull that fee back and forth. So the marketplace owners are able to enforce their fees somewhat against traits that lower fees for the merchants that are coming in. So there should be some. Yes.
I don't know if that's already in the marketplace UI, but maybe you want to just pull open the marketplace UI to showcase where that is.
Yeah. So the fees that you'll see would be like here, where you'll see this taker fee. But like I said, it's not filled in at the moment. But if it were, and if I had relevant traits, you would see this getting pulled back and forth, where the owner of the marketplace might have a fee enforcement bonus, but I might have a fee reduction bonus, and you'll see kind of the interplay between those. So it's sort of like a bit of merchant PvP that should continue sort of indefinitely as we move into discovery, and you're able to kind of skill up your merchants, get better, effectively at negotiating these fees with with the market participants.
Question for you here while we're on the screen from Juice. With a product like Core you could buy one. With a product like water, you could buy 1,000 tons. With a marketplace order, is the price you are shown for something like water based on a single kilo or ton?
It is based on the unit of the product. In many cases, most cases, I would say, 1 kilogram is a unit. In this case, for these sort of like assembled goods, these are goods that are usually further along on the production chain. The units are more self-explanatory. It's a cordial or, a hull, for example. So that'll be that. I mean, that's communicated. I think like Proto, if you'd like, you're welcome to talk a little bit more about that. But effectively, we've chosen a unit size for all of these products, and that's the base unit that the sway price applies to.
Yep, that describes it pretty well. I mean, some products are quantized, meaning they have a unit that is not just a single kilogram, but others are not quantized. You think of it as like a fluid, is a liquid or like a material, or is it a component? Is it an object? It's an object. It's always quantized and has an amount that is not 1 kilogram.
1 kilogram. Are the units hooked up? Can we just go to a different product and just see it for ourselves?
Yeah, I think you see them here, for example. Soil is sold in a per kilogram basis. So you'll see those units pop up as these are populated. Right now you're seeing that this is per kilogram. These are per units. And furthermore, in showing how much is available, you see that the soil has 19.9 tons available, whereas these more discrete items just have the number of units that are available.
Man, some mobility modules.
Yeah, so some follow-up questions. Athrax is asking, is there a minimum amount per order? So first question then, would items with less amount show up first?
There is a minimum amount, and it's 1 unit, whatever that is. In some cases, it's quite small, but it's typically just whatever that smallest discrete unit is of the material is the smallest amount that you can buy or sell. And I'm not sure I understood the second question.
So I think it would be like if you go to the actual if you click soil and you were to look at the depth chart or any of these, then you just want to know or see which ones are first. So it looks like all of these are selling at the same price.
Yeah, I mean it's as is typical with a depth chart, right? Like you're going to see the ones that are closest to the center price first. It's effectively trying to encourage you to participate in the market at the closest price to the middle.
Right. If you're buying, there's a bunch of limited cells on the marketplace. If you go to buy it, you'll hit the cells that are cheapest first, and then work its way to more expensive ones, and vice versa for buys. That's just how these work.
Yeah.
And then question from Admiral: wouldn't people's natural response be to look at a crew who is manning the market and only do buys on a market that you have an advantage for?
Yes, I think so. If you mean by the ones that would be less effective at reducing the fees, I think that's all part of the game. If a market owner is setting their fees to be attractive, and they realize that for whatever reason, their bonus to fee enforcement is causing the market to go elsewhere, it's likely that they'll reduce their fees. But I think the nice thing for the owner of a marketplace that has a high level of fee enforcement is that it gives them a bit more predictability. Rather than setting your maker and taker fees at 1% and then realizing every time that you're quote getting taken advantage of and the fees that you actually receive are half that, you can set them at 1% and be more confident that you'll actually get roughly 1%.
Yeah, and I think something else to also probably add to this would be liquidity is king. If you're going to buy a bunch of things and a market has really advantage, an advantage for you to go buy those things, but there's only 5 of them and you want 1,000 of them, then you're probably just going to pony up to the marketplace that has slightly higher fees because you don't want to go to like 30 different marketplaces to get the things that you want.
Well, you could set up a bunch of orders and wait for them all to arrive.
Yep. Well.
Yeah, it's the patient versus the impatient. When I want something, I typically just go buy it. If you're playing the long game and you're trying to squeak out the most sway possible, then I think you're gonna definitely be patient. I know. We have plenty of people trading asteroids on secondary markets, and they're patient. They put low buy orders, and they wait for sellers to dump into those bids.
That's fair, especially when you're talking about different asteroids, right? Like that's a whole other level of impatience.
And also keep in mind that you can set maker and taker fees separately as a marketplace owner. So you can lure a lot of liquidity by having low maker fees, and then make all your money off taker fees. Taker fees, you can do it different ways.
Which is
game will be played.
I think a pretty typical, strategy. Coinbase follows that. Most of these centralized exchanges follow that same strategy.
Yeah. I was actually talking to someone who ran a lot of marketplaces and has helped build index funds, worked at Goldman Sachs, blah. So this is pretty cutthroat. Where like if you have a commodity selling at a lower price, and someone with a lot of money doesn't want it to be on the market at that price, like Gutsy's saying, arbitrage spreads across the market. They're just going to buy you up and put it on their market because they don't want competition.
Yeah, and I think this is going to be one of the more exciting PvP elements for during exploitation. Prior to getting to the kind of progressively more PvP activities through discovery and then obviously into conflict. I know we're running out of time, so I'd like to just show off travel a little bit real quick. So what I'm going to do here is, I've got a ship on the surface. This is a light transport ship. I have this option, of course, to launch my ship. To go over a little bit about what's happening here, we've got my ship sitting on this empty lot on AP. It's going to be taking off, and its destination is orbit of Adalian Prime, where it can then further travel elsewhere. There's two options for how I launch. I can go for free, which is this hopper-assisted launch, which takes longer and doesn't expend any fuel, or I can go with this propulsive launch, which will cost me some fuel and some propellant, but gets me there effectively immediately. So I'm going to go ahead and do that because we don't have time to wait. So again, you're not seeing.
It thinks there's port traffic here. Which there totally isn't when you're launching right
from an empty lot. No, there won't ever be in that case. But if you were in a spaceport, if you're in a heavily trafficked spaceport, you will, if it gets over full, see that there is a delay in kind of ground activities like landing and taking off. So now we are in orbit. We have now the ability to land our ship, which we could do effectively the opposite. We could eject our crew, which means they'd be ejected into a escape module in orbit. We're not going to do that either for now. We're just going to go ahead and see if we can travel to another asteroid real quick. So to do that, we'll turn on create flight plan. Just going to pick something nearby as our destination. Oh, and you can see that I forgot to feed myself. So in this case, if you notice that this chart is faded, it's more opaque than usual. The reason for that is that I am not fed. So food, when it comes to travel, the thing that it impacts mostly is whether you can, or how long you can travel for. So if you're fully fed, you can travel for that full 18 months. If you are fed less than full, then that time period will reduce. But effectively, this is the same thing you've seen before, where you're selecting an ideal trip. You can gauge between your departure delay. So this is saying that it would be 44 hours from now before I left. The flight time would be 161 hours. And so then you get that total time of 205 hours at the use of 36% of your propellant. This is now showing the actual values. So it's showing that I have 1,800 tons of propellant on board. It would show the food supplies, which can be modified, and then any actual cargo that's on board, which currently I have 35 tons. Now I'd like to feed myself, but I think that there's a bug currently where
you would have to land, right?
Well,
yes, this is going to be one of the most common gotchas. I was mentioning it 2 weeks ago too, but I was like, oh shoot, I sent my crew to do something. Whoops, they're starving. I think that's going to be such a Either common gotcha game or we're gonna have to deal with it somehow. But it's food limits everything you can do in this game. And it is doubly important that you keep an eye on that little food marker up at the top.
So I'd really like to show you guys this. So I'm going to do some real quick debugging here so I can hopefully get my crew fed and show you the travel happening. So if you just give me 1 sec.
I like Juice's comment here. You can just murder your co-pilot and then you get food. You hover over a crewmate, you click cannibalize, and then you get food. That would be. Oh god, that's a way to get rid of extra Adalians that you invented.
Look at that. All right, so let's try and get ourselves fed because I believe I have some food on board conveniently. So I'm going to go ahead and feed the crew. This is one of the few things you can do, in orbit is go grab some extra food to feed your crew as long as you have some on board. So we'll go ahead and get them fed. Great. Now you can see that immediately we have an update on our pork chop plot and we have much more space that we can travel. This sort of defines, if you can imagine, as you move up along this diagonal axis, that's really the actual amount of time as you add up both the departure delay on this axis and the flight time on this axis. So that's why you're getting this consistent line, which is right at this point, roughly 18 months from now.
Oh, yeah, there's the food line right there.
Yep.
That corner is the starving corner.
So I'm going to go ahead and choose sort of like a reasonable amount of propellant to use. This updates very frequently right now because, again, we have it at 100x, but typically it doesn't need to update so much. So I've set my course. This is going to give me a little bit of information about my flight time, how much delta V I use, the delay until my ship is actually going to leave, my wet mass and dry mass, how much propellant I'm using. Lots of really interesting elements here. But then I can just go ahead and schedule my flight. And once that transaction goes through, then it's just a matter of waiting until I arrive. So there's the Rangers set course from AP to home 3000, whoever named that. So my crew is now on the way. So obviously we won't be on in an hour and a half, but that's a quick look at travel. Once I arrive, I can go ahead and allow for the arrival. I'll arrive into orbit of that asteroid, and then I have a lot of options. I can land, assuming it's scanned. I can start building with materials I brought with me, or I can hop from that asteroid to another one, or go back home.
Yeah. Any way we can look at the ship in orbit?
Yeah. You can look at the ship. Well, it's not in orbit now.
I was going to say, yeah.
It has left.
The thumbnail panels aren't hooked up yet, but
yeah.
Yes, you can get to the ship scene.
Nice. All right. So let's see. Let's
on the way.
Let's look at some questions here. I'm excited to see that on screen. I haven't been able to get it online because I keep running into random events. But nonetheless, let's see if there's some questions here. I see a couple of people typing. Nathrax, your win pre-release question. We're not going to give you dates yet. But what else is missing? Chris, maybe you want to give some color in terms of what we still need to get linked up.
Yeah, we are heavily into polishing the client mode. The other parts that need to happen is we need to get the colonies seeded. So that includes seeding the buildings, seeding the materials into all those warehouses, and seeding the market orders for them, so that when you guys start playing, you actually have something to build with. So that's one. That's relatively straightforward, although it's quite a bit of data. It's just a script. It's just a matter of running through that data and making sure that those buildings are placed appropriately per all of our logic. And then most of the work at the moment is dealing with the permissions, rounding out the last few pieces that need to be in place for the marketplace, and the 8 random event screens that we will start with. When I say permissions, this is not the contracts, it's not the server, it's not searching for the permissions. It's specifically exposing, like Sergey was mentioning earlier, it's about exposing those permissions, those policies in a straightforward, user-friendly way.
So those are panels and management panels.
Yep. So those are our current focuses.
Yeah, thank you for giving some additional information. I know people are eagerly awaiting pre-release.
Yeah, and just to refresh everybody's memory, pre-release will be on Sepolia. At the moment, the wallet support for Sepolia on Starknet is somewhat uneven. Bravos does support Sepolia at the moment. You can go and find Sepolia Ether around. I don't believe that this Starkgate bridge is up yet for Sepolia. I think that is coming in the next 7 days, so it will be then. And then similarly, I believe that Argent will be supporting Sepolia in the next 7 to 10 days. So those last kind of blockers for us are starting to fall away, and we can really get serious about starting pre-release, which I'm very, very excited about.
Yeah, so a few more questions and then we can close this out. I know we're already a little over, so thank you, team, for staying a little longer here. One is, how will we have Sway in pre-release? I know we were talking about that internally yesterday, so Chris, maybe you want to give a little bit of information on that?
Yeah, we're playing with some options. One of the things I would very much like to test is something I'll show next time as well, is the in-client purchase of Sway. That will, as a reminder again, that will go against just the public LPs that exist on the various AMMs that exist on Starknet. We are partnering with both Akubo, which is where we will be placing an LP, but also with Avenue. Avenue is an AMM aggregator. All a complicated way of saying that we're using Avenue to get you the best price via the client. So you'll buy Sway from there. We're going to test that, but of course, being on a test net is pretty ripe for abuse because you can get a bunch of other tokens fairly easily, probably pretty cheaply, and then most likely clean out Sway. I hope none of you will do that. It would be much more helpful for testing for you to participate in the pools and try and experiment a bit with that. Hopefully that's something you'll also do in mainnet release. But to avoid that eventuality, we're also working on just like a simple Sway faucet, a simple like time-limited Sway faucet, which will be, although still possible to be abused, harder to abuse, and something that we can meter a little bit more easily. Also, we'll also be testing the Sway distribution for testnet on L1. That will be in the asset portal, so any of you who participated there can get Sway there. And then just as a reminder, anybody who had Sway via the RVOD crew assignments will be able to claim that as well on Sepolia.
So next question we have will there be a snapshot from mainnet for pre-release so that the game client knows the number of EA ships and things like that?
Yes, there was a snapshot, and that's the snapshot that we used for seeding Sepolia. All the asteroids are there. Some of them may have changed hands, so that may be the case that your asteroid, if you sold it, is still yours, or if you bought it after the snapshot, is not yours. But remember, asteroid sales will be available. There's no reason you can't go and buy more on Sepolia, and all of those crewmates, all of the asteroids that were present at that snapshot will be created.
I see some
Yeah, I mean, markets are PvP, so anytime you think you see an advantage of something clever you can do, like there's usually a reason that that's actually risky. So, in the case of somebody actually trying to stall out the entire economy right after launch by buying all of everything and then hoarding it and not using it or selling it back again, like that's the situation where we would come in with the blunt hammer and reseed back at the original price. So, don't play that game. You will lose a lot of money.
Yep. Thank you, folks.
Take care.
Thank you all.